If you're from the United Kingdom, or indeed Europe, and you grew up around the 90s, then you probably owned a SEGA Master System. Itself an offshoot of the Japanese Sega Mark III console created in 1985 to match the might of Nintendo's Famicom, the Master System debuted in 1987 in the UK and Europe, just a smidge ahead of its natural rival the NES. While it went largely unnoticed in the United States, it was welcomed in my home country of the UK. With a competitive price point on release, typically £99, brilliantly executed marketing focusing on its technological advantages over microcomputers, built-in games and value bundles, the Master System gained a good foothold on the British market. It existed in two versions in the UK, the first coming with a plethora of features. Alongside the bog standard RF video output of the time, it included SCART video for a crystal clear picture. It also integrated Sega card format compatibility from the off, giving access to a handful of budget titles, many of which made it to the standard cartridge format anyway. The very same card slot also accommodated the 3D glasses peripheral compatible with a small selection of games. While it lacked the FM sound unit found in its Asian counterpart, and the aforementioned 3D glasses failed to wow the crowds, the Master System was still, for the time, an impressive contender in the British gaming scene, itself near saturation point from a thriving microcomputer culture. Even when the Sega Mega Drive, a 16-bit blast process successor, came over to British shores by around 1989, Master System sales remained solid thanks to a string of hits, many of which were conversions of Sega's own big hitters. As the Mega Drive grew in popularity, the Master System was repositioned as an entry-level console in Sega's now expanding roster and redesigned as a low-cost model. Gone from the Master System 2 were the card slot and SCART outputs, but the built-in games remained, sealing its reputation for being affordable and instantly playable out of the box. The Master System petered out in Japan as early as 1989, its final game there being Bomber Raid, and North America had left it behind for the Genesis by 1991, right after Sonic the Hedgehog made his 8-bit debut. But the Master System enjoyed a prolonged shelf life in much of Europe, coexisting alongside the Mega Drive, Mega CD, 32X, Game Gear, and even the Sega Saturn up until around 1996, when even the Mega Drive was starting to look tired. Even more remarkably though, in Brazil, the Master System was enthusiastically welcomed upon its arrival in 1989, not least due to its affordability, but also thanks to a manufacturing partnership with local toy manufacturers Tectoy, something no other console manufacturer was willing to do at the time, and became the most popular console in the country, a title that stands even to this day. As a result, the Master System, albeit now found in many plug-and-play variations with integrated games, now holds the record as the longest-lived games console in history, a record that is unlikely ever to be beaten. Across the 6 major regions, no less than 360 officially licensed Master System games were published in all. With a library so large, there are bound to be plenty of excellent titles to be found. In this video, I've singled out 10 that stand out to me as the best in my personal experience. I won't be covering any of the obvious big hitters in this one, so don't expect to see the likes of Sonic the Hedgehog or Alex Kidd. They've been done before, and besides, they deserve entire videos of their own. And while I would certainly count Dead Angle, R-Type and Transbot amongst my personal favourites, I've already done them to death on the channel, so they're out too. Since this list is based on my own opinions and ignores any sales figures or official review scores, I'm sure your mileage will vary, so I apologise in advance for any omissions or inclusions that surprise or affront you. As always, please let me know what you think in the comments, and I hope you enjoy this rundown of my 10 best Sega Master System games. A breathtaking game no matter what version you play, Prince of Persia is all the more impressive on the Master System. The villainous Grand Vizier Jafar has taken the princess as a prisoner and thrown our plucky hero into the dungeons to rot. The clock is ticking, an hour specifically, to escape the prison, defeat Jafar and rescue the princess. It's a familiar and well-worn premise, and one that we will find coming up again and again in this era of gaming. But this early cinematic platforming adventure is more than meets the eye, with realistic character actions, animation and swordplay all held aloft with eye-popping visuals. Each screen uncovers a puzzle of obstacles, armed guards and death traps requiring a combination of patience, skill and critical thinking to overcome safely. More commonly found wowing players on the likes of the Apple II, DOS PC and Amiga to name a few, Prince of Persia still impresses even on the Master System console, not least due to the outstanding job that Domark did of squeezing it all onto a Master System cartridge with minimal compromise and getting it to work so well with the aging hardware. A certain degree of fluidity is lost due to a lack of animation frames, but the feeling of epic scale and swashbuckling adventure that makes the original game so appealing has not been lost in the conversion. The visuals actually look better than the original, with more colours on the screen bringing extra life and detail, recreated from the ground up by the graphics artists using the original game as a visual reference. It's a shame that the sound effects and music aren't quite up to snuff, but with gameplay like this it scarcely matters. Prince of Persia is a creative and technical marvel unlike anything else in the Master System's library, and proved that in 1992 there was still life in the old Master System yet. Disney were enjoying something of a renaissance in the 90s, what with The Little Mermaid breathing some much needed life into their reputation. The same could be said for their run of hit games, not least of which being Castle of Illusion, made in partnership with SEGA. It's an example of Disney's distinctive cartoon style merging seamlessly with the graphical capabilities of the Master System, with intuitive platforming gameplay, a strength of the console, into the bargain. The aim of the game is pure Disney fairy tale. A jealous witch has pinched Minnie Mouse, and it's up to Mickey to liberate her, journeying through a series of magical realms and collecting gems in order to do so. Despite the humdrum story, it's a well-crafted game. It's bright and colourful, and being a platformer, easy to get into. Mickey can butt-bounce baddies into oblivion, or he can pick up items to hurl at them, an admittedly clumsier option, but the inviting, cheery facade conceals grim challenges ahead. Tricksy platforming with some light puzzle elements and a sprinkling of booby traps makes Castle of Illusion more than meets the eye appropriately. This is not one for the impatient player looking to just blast through it. In some cases, good timing is key, especially with the end of level bosses, and in the later stages it can get pretty hazardous pretty quick if you're not careful. This is one that I rented frequently back in the day, before Sega put a stop to all that, and going back to it today, I can still see the charm, though I'm unsure if younger me would ever have had the patience to finish it off. While some might argue that the follow-up games Land of Illusion and World of Illusion improved on the formula established in this game, Castle of Illusion's contribution to the landscape of Disney licensed Master System games is significant enough to earn it a place on this list. Viewed in comparison with its 16-bit counterpart, it might look a bit pedestrian, so maybe just don't do that, because as a Master System game, it's one of the all-time greats. Dynamite Dux is a side-scrolling brawler that originated in the arcades in 1998 and was ported to the Master System for Europe and Brazil in 1990. There was a Mega Drive port in the works for some time, but it was never completed. It was one of Sega's in-house creations, produced by the legend himself Yu Suzuki, with music composed by Hiroshi Kawaguchi, and is a parody of Double Dragon. The usual damseling tropes abound in this simplistic tale, as there's tons of minions to dispatch before you meet an evil sorcerer and rescue poor kidnapped Lucy. If you're a fan of such brawlers as Double Dragon or Golden Axe but fancy some levity, Dynamite Dux is ideal. Violence it has in spades, but all in an exaggerated Tex Avery Looney Tunes style, with oversized boxing gloves and bazookas amongst the weaponry. This is one of those games that passed me by in the day, but I found time to discover more recently, and I find it's pretty good. It's no walk in the park though, as enemies are varied enough in ability as to pose quite the challenge if you let them, but never so much as to make you rage quit. In the transition from the SEGA System 16 hardware to the Master System, a lot was missed out. While the original was a 2-player affair, the 8-bit port is strictly solo play. Bonus rounds were omitted, and a lot of animation frames and power-ups were left on the cutting room floor also, owing to the limited cartridge space. But all of the wacky and irreverent humour remains, thankfully, mostly held up by the Kawaguchi score that oozes character throughout. The explanation of the game's story changed on the way to home consoles too, as now instead of the kidnapped and decidedly human girl Lucy being just good friends with the Ducks, she's now the hero's girlfriend. Now, as abominable as that sounds, the Amiga port goes even further with the implied bestiality. But maybe that's a story for another day. One of Sega's own, the Ninja is an adaptation of their arcade title Ninja Princess, one of the earliest examples of not only a run and gun, but a playable female protagonist. In the arcade and SG-1000 versions, Princess Kazumi is the hero of the story as she embarks on a quest to save her land from an evil tyrant. However, for this Master System version, Kazumi is well and truly damseled, locked in the villain's lair, and a male ninja called Kazamaru takes her place in the leading role. There are a variety of stages to play through, all of which need quick reflexes and nerves of steel to survive. Kazamaru attacks his foes with throwing knives which can be upgraded to more powerful throwing stars. He can also momentarily vanish, protecting him from harm while invisible. Fend off attacks from hordes of evil ninja minions, samurai and shapeshifters, and face off with a boss at the end of each stage. In some levels, the environment itself poses further dangers to you, such as the falling boulders or a stampede of horses. 3 scrolls are hidden in each level which boost your firepower and speed, but more crucially, grant you access to the final level. Miss any of the green scrolls and you're forced to backtrack and keep looking until you've found them all. The ninja may not be much to look at, and the music is limited and therefore very repetitive, but the gameplay is where it counts. Bear in mind that this game first came to the Master System on the Sega card format, so Sega didn't have a whole lot of ROM space to work with. Being derived from an arcade title, the ninja is about as difficult as you can expect, but it's rewarding if you have the patience. While the premise is simple, the execution is anything but, and requires not only a skillful player, but careful exploration to really get the most out of it. The Ninja was one of my games back in the day, and while I found it frustrating then, today I can appreciate it more as a tough but rewarding game with good replay value. Part of my collection way back when, Operation Wolf is a competently executed port of one of Taito's best known shooting gallery games. You are a lone soldier undertaking a deadly mission deep within enemy territory to liberate 5 hostages from a concentration camp. Of course, to get there, you have to fight off a multitude of enemy soldiers, tanks, boats and helicopters over a series of perilous locations. Your only weapons to hand are your semi-automatic and a handful of grenades. The action is merciless. Unlike modern arcade shooters which go easy on you, enemies waste little time in getting shots off at you, so precision aiming and a slick trigger finger are essential. But watch out for friendlies, as not only will you have their deaths on your conscience if you kill them, but you also lose a chunk of your health. That'll learn you. And while ammo and grenade drops are in regular supply, health is not. I'd be lying if I said Operation Wolf wasn't tough. It is. Like real war, it's unforgiving, harsh, and doesn't let up for a second. If, like me, you didn't have a light phaser, there is a joypad only option to control a crosshair on the screen, the speed of which can be adjusted best to suit you. Obviously nothing is better for quick targeting than a light phaser, but I found I could get on fine with just the control pad, even though I could never quite make it to the end. Between the stages, your progress is charted by storybook panels complemented with music that effectively conveys the danger and urgency of your mission. Amongst the small roster of gallery shooters made for the Master System, Operation Wolf stands out as the best of the lot in this reviewer's humble opinion. Sega themselves must have been pretty happy with it too, as they actually bundled it with the light phaser in later Master System 2 packs. Namco were out there subverting expectations long before Rian Johnson did it with their 1987 creation Pac-Mania. This Master System port of their arcade avoid-em-up came along in 1991 courtesy of Tech Magic and Tengen. Here the traditionally flat play area gets a 3D isometric makeover, and to take advantage of this new perspective, Pac-Man is granted the ability to jump over ghosts. This was a game changer for Pac-Man traditionalists, including myself, who would regularly rent this one for weekends from the video shop. The new gameplay rules add an extra dimension to the experience, giving you the chance to avoid those pursuing poltergeists in new ways. Of course, to even things up later on, some of the ghosts can jump too. Oh well, it was good while it lasted. More ghosts in the playfield ramp up the challenge, but unlike the single screen fare of earlier titles, Pac-Mania relies on scrolling, so you can't keep your eye on all of the ghosts at once. So the danger of running into one without warning is therefore ever present. Although Pac-Mania comes with some refinements upon the familiar franchise formula, the simplicity that has always made it accessible remains here. The difficulty will rise as you ascend through the levels, naturally, but never so much as to frustrate you too much or wish you were playing something else. As a casual play experience, Pac-Mania has just about all that you need. Jolly music and good-looking graphics round off this light-hearted, undemanding game that, in my book, is a must-play. Reworked for the Master System by US Gold, Road Rash is one of those ports of an earlier Mega Drive title that came perhaps a little late in the Master System's lifespan, but that doesn't mean it got anything less than the full treatment in its conversion to the 8-bit. This game is, from a visual standpoint at least, virtually indistinct from its 16-bit cousin. That is until you notice that there are fewer features on the road and the bikes are significantly slower. But that doesn't make it any less of an achievement, as much of the content from the Mega Drive version made it over. The premise of the game sees you take to the roads on your trusty motorbike, competing in illegal street races with other riders in a no-holds-barred biker brawl. Some of the competitors will hate your guts, while others will befriend you and help you on your way. Just try not to batter them whilst you're out there on the road, or they will turn on you. Watch out for debris, oncoming traffic, and most importantly, the police. If they catch you, not only is the race over for you, but they'll hit you with a hefty fine. Crashes are thankfully not deadly, but they can fling you several hundred yards away from your bike, which you then have to run back to without getting further pancaked by the traffic. Each victory earns cash, which is in turn used to upgrade your bike, and a password save system preserves your progress. Being released so late on in the Master System's life in 1994, this one only made the rounds in parts of Europe and Brazil. As racing titles go, Road Rash impresses, from the magnificent visuals to the depth of gameplay to the sheer unadulterated joy of beating the snot out of your opponents at high speed. I'm well aware I've extensively covered this one before, and I'm breaking my own rule as set out at the start of this video, but for the Dragon's Trap I'll happily make an exception. I wasn't fortunate enough to have played this back in its heyday, but on reflection I don't think younger me would have had the patience for it. Luckily, adult me does, and when I first played it a handful of years ago, I was so impressed by its depth and complexity that I was inspired to start my series of videos about the Wonder Boy series. It was the first of the Wonder Boy games to be uniquely made for a home console, and while it also appeared in a strikingly similar form on the PC Engine, albeit by a different name, the Master System is where it's at for the Dragon's Trap. Picking up immediately after Wonder Boy 2, the story refreshingly eschews any mention of rescuing princesses or any kind of damsel, and instead pits you on a quest to reverse whatever devilry just turned you into a dragon. In doing so, you have to take on the forms and abilities of other creatures, each with their own unique skills, strengths and weaknesses, to access new areas of the world and further your quest. It's rather the Elden Ring of Master System games, refusing to hold your hand and leaving you to figure out what to do next, and in doing so, it's immensely satisfying when you make progress. With tons of secrets to discover and items to collect, Dragon's Trap embodies the RPG Lite and Metroidvania formula used in many a game since. The vibrant and colourful graphics are full of charm, while the soundtrack, even better if you can get it in FM sound, is one of the most eclectic and memorable selections of music ever heard in a Master System game. If you've not played this one, I'd highly recommend giving it a try. Being a Japanese exclusive, this is technically a SEGA Mark III game, but I like it, so it's going in the list. The keen-eyed amongst you will have already spotted that it's the arcade classic Rygar, converted for the 8-bit, although in this case going by its Japanese title of The Crossed Blade of Argos. Of course, I never had the chance to play this back in the day, instead discovering it in an Everdrive game list a couple of years ago, and it's actually pretty good. This is honest-to-goodness side-scrolling action fare. Enemies come at you thick and fast from all directions, while one-hit deaths keep the pressure on for a truly tense experience. Along the way, there are various power-ups to increase the range and effectiveness of your weapon, which become important to keep as the action starts to heat up. However, thanks to slightly balked jumping, the occasional moments of platforming end up with you falling to your death a bit more often than you might like. Each time you start a new life, you lose all of the fancy weapon upgrades that you collected earlier. So it's one of those games where mistakes are punished and it's difficult to get back to peak performance after a simple mistake. The most fun comes from the alternating 2-player mode. Going head to head to beat each other's score or get further through than your rival makes for a much more satisfying playthrough than a solo campaign. But however you choose to play it, Rygar by any other name is fast, challenging and entertaining, and it's definitely worth your time. It's no secret that SEGA briefly made a mascot of sorts out of the star of this game, and it's easy to see why. The game is excellent. Not only is it impressive both visually and musically for an early Master System title, but it stands up well next to later games like Sonic the Hedgehog or Castle of Illusion. Fantasy Zone is a port of an arcade title, as most early Master System games were, and follows the exploits of Opa Opa, a sentient spaceship, as he fights to save his solar system from the invaders who just pitched up, in this psychedelic cute-em-up that inspired many like it. Each level must be cleared not only of enemies but of the machines that spew them forth into the levels before it's time to face off with an end-of-level guardian. Each defeated enemy yields money which can be spent between the stages to upgrade Opa Opa from his firepower to his horsepower. Opa Opa is unique as a shmup character in that not only can he fly in all directions like the spaceship in Defender, but can also waddle along the ground if he needs to. Despite its non-threatening appearance, Fantasy Zone is no walk in the park. Stages get increasingly harder while each Guardian puts poor Opa Opa into intense bullet hell scenarios. However, Fantasy Zone is an example of a game done right. That the sequel, Fantasy Zone 2, The Tears of Opa Opa, only marginally improved on it, is a testament to how right they got it in the first place. Fantasy Zone is a must-have for anyone looking for a great time on the Master System. So, those were my 10 favourite Master System games, but what about yours? I'd love to know what you think, so please fire away in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Feel free to check out my other videos on the channel. Huge thanks to all of my subscribers, old and new. It's your support and encouragement that keeps this channel going, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time on Retro Respawn.